I'm Vince Donovan. I'm the co-executive director of the East Bay Photo Collective in Oakland, California. This video is an introduction to developing 4x5 black and white film at home. It's nice to be able to do this process in a real darkroom, but many of us don't have access to one. It's also nice to be near a sink, but you don't even need that. I've developed film in kitchens and bathrooms, hotel rooms, cars, basements, picnic tables, bars, attics, you name it. This is a robust process and it'll work for you. There's actually a lot of different techniques and tools for developing 4x5 film. We're going to be using my favorite, which is the Stearman SP445 developing tank. I like this tank because, one, it's small, it's compact and easy to store. Two, it's very easy to load. If you can load a film holder, you can load this tank. And thirdly, it's a daylight tank. So we just need to go into the dark to load the film initially, and the whole rest of the process takes place in room light. Let's take a look at the overall steps. So first we're going to gather our supplies and then mix the solutions that we need for developing. Thirdly, we're going to practice loading our film into the tank. This is really important. It will really make your life a lot better. After we've practiced a little bit, then we will actually load our film into the tank. And then finally, we'll start the development process. The development process itself is very straightforward. First, there's a 1-minute pre-wash of our film. Secondly, we'll pour in the developer, and the amount of development time depends on the developer and film combination. Next, we'll wash with water for 30 seconds, and then fix for 3 minutes, and a final wash where we'll use the Ilford archival wash process, which is very conservative with water. Finally, we'll rinse our film out and hang it up to dry. So let's get started gathering our supplies, and first there's the must-haves. So, of course, you must have exposed film that you shot in your camera that's ready to develop. Secondly, we need that Stearman SP445 developing tank. Next thing we need is a film developer, and I'll be talking about our choice of film developer next. Next, we need a fixer. In this case, we're using Ilford Rapid Fix. We do need some water for our developing process. We need about a gallon to develop 4 sheets of film, so we can use anything to store your water in. A bucket is handy for dumping your liquids out into. A 1-liter metric measuring cup. Most measuring cups that you buy now will be marked both in metric and English system, but definitely want a 1-liter metric measuring cup. And a 1-liter bottle that's going to hold the fixer solution that we'll mix. You'll need a timer of some sort. You can use a phone or watch. In this case, we're using a vintage darkroom timer because why not? We need a thermometer to check the temperature of our developing solution. And we also want a time temperature conversion chart so that once we've measured the temperature of the developer, we can adjust the developing time accordingly. Next thing we need are a couple of sheets of used 4x5 film that we can use to practice loading the Stearman tank. You may think this is a nice to have, but I really think it's a must have. You will get much better results and you'll feel much more comfortable with the developing process if you can practice a little bit before you get started. It's almost worth burning a few fresh sheets of film to have some practice sheets to start with, but maybe ask at a local camera shop or in a photography group and see if another photographer has some spare sheets you can use. And of course, we need a dark place to load our film tank, so we'll be using this inexpensive changing bag. So just to recap our must-haves, you need your exposed film, of course, a Stearman tank, a film developer, about a gallon of water, fixer, a 1-liter measuring cup, a 1-liter bottle, a thermometer, a timer, the time temperature chart, and some film to practice with. So those are the must-haves. Let's talk about the nice-to-have. The first is PhotoFlow, which is a wetting solution that will help keep water spots off our film. Next is a clothesline and some clothespins that we can use to hang the film up to dry after the developing process is complete. I like to have a small tray, plastic or glass, that helps with the final rinse. I recommend wearing gloves during the process. The solutions that we're working with are not really poisonous, but they can irritate your skin. Funnel is self-explanatory. It's good for pouring things in and out. And there's a preservative spray called Protectan that can help preserve the life of our chemicals. So if you're not developing very often, only once a month or less, this can help extend the life of the chemicals so they don't go bad on you. So there are the nice-to-haves. PhotoFlow, clothesline and pins, protective gloves, small tray, funnel, some masking tape and markers for marking your bottles, and a preservative spray. Quick note about how this process differs from other processes you might see. We are not using a stop bath between the developer and the fixer. This simplifies the process a little bit and really doesn't affect the outcome. Many photographers do not use a stop bath when developing their film. Another issue is temperature control. In this video, everything is going to be done at room temperature, which in my darkroom today is about 70 degrees, which is perfect for developing film. Since every single thing in my darkroom is at that temperature, I don't have to worry about it. We'll talk more about temperature later, but in the winter, when it gets in the 50s here, that's too cold to develop film. So I will frequently fill a tub of warm water and heat my solutions up to 70. But today we don't need to worry about that since everything, including the water out of the tap, is about the same temperature. Let's talk about choice of film developer. There are dozens of film developers available. It's actually not hard to make your own. Each developer and film combination has its own characteristics, so you've got years of fun research and experimentation ahead of you to find a film and developer combination that you like. But again, you could get world-class results with simple choices. The simplest choice is to choose a film and developer from the same manufacturer. The big advantage is that the film manufacturer will have a recommended development time for that film in that developer. It may not be the perfect development time for the way that you shoot, which is another area for experimentation, but it will be a pretty darn good place to start. For this video, I shot an Ilford HP5 film, and I'm going to be using Ilford Ilfosol liquid developer. This is a great combination and can give you world-class results. If you are just getting started, I recommend using a developer that's packaged as a liquid. There are some excellent developers that are packaged as powders, but it's just an extra thing to deal with to mix them up. Whereas a liquid packaged developer, you just add water. Here's the chart that Ilford provides that gives the development times for all of their different films in all of their different developers. From this close-up, we can see that for HP5 film in Ilfosol 3 developer diluted 1:9, Ilford recommends a 6.5 minute development time at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. In the time it's taken to prepare this video, my darkroom has cooled down to about 68 degrees, so I don't need to use my time temperature adjustment chart to adjust the development time for the temperature. But if we weren't at 68 degrees, that would be the next step. There is a website and app called the Massive Dev Chart that has development times for hundreds of combinations of film and developer. This is a great resource. Just remember that those times are provided by other photographers who may or may not shoot the way you do. Anyway, if you are just getting started, it's best to stick with the manufacturer recommendations. So we've got our stuff together, we've chosen a film developer. Let's get started. First, fill up your water jug with water so it can come up to room temperature. Now we're going to make a stock solution of fixer. For film, this is diluted 1:9. So we measure out 100 milliliters of solution and add water to make 1 liter. Now I can pour it in the bottle and label it. When you use fixer, you don't pour it out afterwards, but it gets reused. This 1 liter bottle of fixer is good for about a dozen rolls of film or about 50 sheets of 4x5. This developer is also conveniently diluted 1:9. Our SP tank needs about 500 milliliters of solution, or half a liter. So we'll measure out 50 milliliters of developer and add 450 milliliters of water. We'll pop the thermometer in here and let it all come to room temperature. While the solutions are coming to room temperature, I'm going to practice loading the tank. And again, I recommend doing this every single time you sit down to develop. So I'm going to set it up just the way that I'm going to be working in the dark. I like to have the frames in front of me and the film to the left. And I've put some practice film inside those film holders. I take the sheets one at a time out of the film holder and place them in the frame. As you're sliding them into the frame, you may need to wiggle them slightly. And again, practice will help you here. So I'm just going to flip it over and load the second sheet into that frame. Guiding it with my left hand, and again, you may need to wiggle the film a little bit. Once the frame is filled, it goes into the tank. It's actually a little trickier than it looks like here, which is why practice is very important. Just like when you were loading a film holder, you want to make sure you have the emulsion side of the film facing outward. You can make sure that the emulsion side is facing outward by finding the notches on the film and make sure they're in the upper right-hand corner. Of course, we're going to eventually be doing this in pitch darkness, which is why it's good to practice, especially with your eyes closed. Now the time has come to load the film for real. We'll be using this changing bag, which looks a little bit like a black shirt. And in fact, I've used a black t-shirt or a coat as a changing bag. You can see it has this zipper compartment. So I'll put my two film holders into the changing bag along with the SP445 developing tank. I'm also going to put in a little plastic box, which is just going to give me some extra elbow room in there while I'm doing the changing. You can use a box, a plastic box, a cardboard box, or try it without a box. Of course, you don't have to use a changing bag at all if you have a dark place where you can do this. It could be a closet, it could be a dark room. You can certainly load the tank the night before and then do your developing the next day. Now I've got everything in the changing bag. I can slide my arms into the sleeves and start the loading process that we practiced just a few minutes ago. Once the tank is loaded, we can take it out of the changing bag, start the developing process. As we saw, the basic steps are a pre-wash, a developer, which is going to be 6.5 minutes, followed by a water wash, 3 minutes in the fixer, a final wash, and a final rinse. There are two caps on the tank. One is labeled vent and the other is labeled fill. Take both caps off when you are filling and pour the solution into the fill spout. I'm not using a measuring cup to measure out the water here, but it actually makes life a little bit easier to just measure out 500 milliliters and pour it in. So we'll put the caps back on the tank and start the timer, in this case for 1 minute. And we'll give it a few inversions during that 1 minute period. After 1 minute and a few inversions, pour out the pre-rinse water into your bucket. You'll see it's usually blue or purple in color. That's due to the anti-halation dye that's on the film. Before we pour in the developer, we'll set the timer for the time that we read off of the Ilford sheet for this particular film at this particular temperature in this particular developer. In our case today, it's 6.5 minutes. Now we can pour in the developer that we mixed earlier and start the timer. Remember to remove both caps from the tank every time that you're pouring in or pouring out solutions. Agitation is a very important part of the development process. In this case, we're going to be inverting the tank twice every 30 seconds, which is a good standard for most developers. After each agitation, set the tank down with a firm bump to dislodge any air bubbles. So time is almost up, so I'm going to remove the caps just in anticipation of the timer going off, so it'll be quick and easy to pour out the developer. The next step is a 30-second water rinse. Again, some photographers will use an acid stop bath in this step, but we're just keeping things simple and just filling the tank with water, giving it an inversion for 30 seconds. While the film is rinsing in water, we can measure out the fixer for the next step. So take the fixer that we mixed up earlier and just pour out 500 milliliters into the measuring cup. "500 milliliters is actually a tiny bit too much for the SP445 developing tank. I think the max is supposed to be 485 milliliters, or just under half a liter, but to keep things simple, we're just pouring in half a liter. With the fixer poured in and the caps on, we'll set the timer for 3 minutes. And just like we did with the developer, we will agitate every 30 seconds and give it a good bump when we set it down to dislodge air bubbles. Once the timer is up, the fixer goes back into our fixer bottle. Remember to remove both caps from the tank when you're pouring liquids in or out. For the final wash, we will use the Ilford archival wash process, which is very straightforward and doesn't use much water. First, fill the tank with water and give it 5 inversions. Now dump that water out, fill it again, and give it 10 inversions. And the last pass is to dump it out again, fill it again, and give it 20 inversions. So there you go. It's done. Our film has been developed and fixed and washed. It's no longer sensitive to light, so I can take it out of the developing tank. It's ready to be hung up to dry. I do want to show you a final step, which is technically optional but highly recommended, which is to do a final rinse of your film in a wetting agent like Kodak PhotoFlow or Ilford's Ilfitol. I use a small tray of water for this, and you add a tiny amount of your wetting agent, just a few drops. A capful is too much, a half cap is too much, a quarter cap is too much. Really, less is more here. Set your developed film in the tray with the wetting agent. You can put all sheets in there. Handle them carefully because the emulsion is a little bit soft. Now just grab one sheet of film and shake the excess off. It's ready to hang up to dry. Hang your film overnight somewhere where there's not too much dust. Here's an alternative drying method in case you don't have a clothesline handy. Set out a towel and just lean the film against a clean surface. Make sure the emulsion side is out, facing you. Here's another optional step. The solutions that we bought for this process will oxidize and go bad over time, but by spraying a little bit of preservative in them, they will last much longer. Well, that's it. I hope that this video has been useful to you, and please join us at the East Bay Photo Collective, ebpco.org.